Audio test. Audio test. All right, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Gallagher of Thraben University, and today I'll be streaming some red-white death and taxes with a list similar to what I've been working with previously. While some people sort of get in here and join, I want to talk about this list just a little bit for anyone who hasn't seen this before. And then I want to actually talk about the SCG lists before I start streaming, because I think there were like a whopping like 7, 3, 6, 7. Yeah, there were 7 different D&T lists in the results from the Star City game Open, which was team constructed, as well as their Legacy Classic, which is a really, really good weekend from the deck. Hello guys, thank you for joining. Ooh, from Vietnam. Excellent. Got a lot of variety here. Alright, so here's what I'm going to be streaming with tonight. It's the red-white build, but I am now trying a second Vryn Wingmare in the main. One of the things I've noticed is that against a lot of the blue decks of the format, if I just do something like curve Thalia into Wingmare, the game is just effectively over due to the stacking nature of the taxation effects. So while I'm hesitant to go up to too many Vryn Wingmares, because then our number of, sort of X1 white creatures gets way too high for my liking, with more general additional taxation effects, I like what's going on there. I don't want to go, like, full Wingmare build and do like the 4 that Michael Derkso did a couple of years ago, but I like throwing a bonus Wingmare in there. Otherwise, this is what I've been working with off and on. I'm also trying out another Recruiter of the Guard in the sideboard. This is something that Ayati suggested to me. Like, it doesn't really look that great, but in practice, it's been really nice having extra copies of Leonin Relic Warder and Pia and Kira Nalar in particular. Like, I've won, I think, all of my games against Sneak and Show since I put the Relic Warder and the 3rd Recruiter of the Guard in the board, just because being able to very consistently tutor that up has been really, really powerful for me. And in the matchups where, like, you have a certain card that matters, like P&K versus Checkpile or Miracles or Magus of the Moon against a lot of the really greedy multicolored decks, like, just having that extra copy has been really, really good. I think it's too slow for me to necessarily want it in the main all of the time, but especially for, like, when you're going and you're boarding out things like your Swords to Plowshares and you have a lot of cards to board out, having the Recruiter to board in, if nothing else is good, has been pretty fantastic. It's nice to have more 2 white 3-drops. I find that sometimes with the white-white build, I can't cast it on curve all the time. Yeah, I agree. So just to, like, pull up that deck list for a second, if you look at, like, my Mirran Crusader build, which I love, it's rough. Like, almost all of the 3-drops, with the exceptions of the Recruiters, are white-white. And in the sideboard, it's not much better because you have, like, these Council's Judgments, the Prelate, the Gideons as well. Whereas you compare that to white-white, and the only cards that are white-white are Flicker Wisp, which you really hope to vial in, and Palace Jailer, which you don't really intend on playing on curve most of the time anyway. An extra Recruiter on the board has made some extra smoothness for boarding ins and outs for me in the white-white build. Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable card as a sideboard option that I didn't really explore before. So I've been really, really enjoying that. I don't want to focus too much on any one of these lists, but I just want to spend, maybe a minute on each one of these, just kind of talking about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the builds that we saw this weekend at the Open. One of the things you have to keep in mind with the team constructed Open is that in a lot of cases, we don't actually know what someone's record for that event was. Like, we know their team did well, we don't know how well that individual did. So I'm not going to say much about Travis Brown's list because I'm actually going to have him write an article for Thraben University and give his own take on both his list and sort of how his event went. But he got sixth place in the Open with what looks like a traditional pre-Sensei's Divining Top deck, really. It looks almost identical to this, at least the main deck anyway, where you see a split of Serra Avengers and Mirran Crusaders, some Recruiter of the Guards, some utility, and something like Sanctum Prelate, as well as a whole bunch of generic sideboard cards. So his list is pretty much like what I have up here, with the exception of this card is a Manriki Gusari instead. So his list, like, kind of shows that you can play whatever general shell you want and succeed. Like, I have been advocating the Red Splash in the past couple of weeks. Before that, I was really big on the Mirran Crusader build, which I still think is very good, but, you know, here's a fantastic finish with sort of an average in many ways D&T deck. He's trying out Cataclysm, whereas I had Gideon previously, which is a good change and one that I had already recommended to some people. Alright, so looking at the next list, this was another top 8. It's 3-color taxes. I don't like calling it Mardu. Like, I understand it's descriptive, but it's terribly, terribly ugly. I just don't like that. I can't get behind that. Alright, so there are some things that I really like about this build and some things I dislike about the build. So it's similar to my red-white build in the main deck, but it's taken a couple of directional changes. So you can see, like, there's another Recruiter of the Guard here. There's more of an attempt to lock your opponent out with more Sanctum Prelates. Like, there's 2 Prelates in the main here, as well as Spirit of the Labyrinth to, again, kind of contribute to that lock build. But this mana base is very, very different from what a lot of people are trying out. This one goes the full 4 Cavern of Souls, as well as a Scrubland. That means that this build has dropped to 2 Rishadan ports, and all of this is happening mostly to make the 2 Orzhov Pontiffs in the sideboard actually castable. So this deck actually would have trouble casting things that aren't humans. So for example, these Swords to Plowshares become a little bit harder to cast, because, like, you have these Cavern of Souls on top of the ports and the Wastelands, so you have 4, 8, 9, 10 sources of mana that don't necessarily cast the Cavern, that don't necessarily cast the Swords to Plowshares. And while you might be saying, like, oh, that's not all that scary, like, this is also 23 lands instead of 24, while also running a bunch of 4-drops. Like, there's the PNKs here, there's a Gideon in the sideboard. Did this one have Jailer? No, this one did not have Jailer. And with this list in particular, since you have so many Cavern of Souls, you're going to be keeping a lot of hands around Cavern of Souls, so you won't necessarily be keeping a hand that can actually cast Swords to Plowshares, even if it's in your hand. I imagine that can make some things like Delver a touch scarier, but like, Cavern of Souls is a really, really powerful card, and if you're going... Oh no, there is a Jailer, there it is. If you're going very heavily on that sort of build, you know, you get a lot of percentage points against decks like Miracles and Check Piles when you just blank their removal in game 1. This looks very vulnerable to Price of Progress. Yeah, so this build only has 3 fetch lands, it looks like, opting instead to get additional utility out of things like Horizon Canopy as well. Whereas in my red-white build, I have, I think, 5-ish? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, whereas I have 5 fetch lands in mine, so I have a greater ability to go and actually get my planes. With this build, there is some real risk of just slamming Magus off Cavern and locking yourself out. So, like, even though there are some fetch lands here, your first one is almost always guaranteed to have to get your basic planes. The sideboard is interesting. It goes away from a lot of the stock cards that are played, and instead kind of goes back to some cards that have fallen out of favor. So like, there's a Pithing Needle and a Ratchet Bomb here, which are both reasonable cards, but I haven't seen very many people opting for Needle recently. It's just not good against a lot of the Tier 1 decks. Ratchet Bomb, similarly, can be great sometimes, but it's sort of an awkward card since you have so many permanents. And this build hates on decks like Storm a little bit more by running 2 copies of Mindbreak Trap in addition to the usual Canonists. So I imagine the Storm matchup feels pretty good with like 2 Canonists, 2 Prelates, a couple of Revokers, bunch of Thalias, Mindbreak Traps, and you get these Orzhov Pontiffs too in case they get Goblins. The addition to your stream is real, by the way. I had plans to shower right now, but I can't leave the keyboard until you're done talking about the SCG deck list. That's fair. I won't keep you from your shower for too long, and when you get back, I'll still be streaming, but it'll be matches then. So this build does cut 2 ports, but those are for other non-basic lands, and not necessarily ways to get planes either. So like this deck has 6 sources of basic planes, whereas mine has like the 5 fetches plus 3 planes, so I have 8. So like it is a difference. Not a huge one, but a difference. I don't dislike this deck. Like, this is a way to attack the format. Like, I'm going to consistently Cavern of Souls high impact cards like Thalia and P&K and Magus and Orzhov Pontiff, and I am going to try to take you down. So we don't know exactly how many wins this deck got because it's a team open, but this is a top 8 deck list. So I would imagine that our D&T player here got a bunch of wins. You know, I don't know exactly how many. I'd be interested to hear, but I imagine the player had a very solid performance, like a very good weekend. You don't, the way a team constructed open goes is like you have to win 2 of your 3 matches with your team. And if you win 2 of the 3, you move on. So in order to top 8 an event like that, you know, most of your team members need to be winning most of their matches. So it's sort of an interesting way to attack the format, a little different from what I'm doing. It's interesting. So here's someone who got the salty 9th place finish with a mono white build. Now it's not a Crusader mono white build, it's an Avenger heavy mono white build. So this one has 3 Serra Avengers, more than is typical. And this one is light on 3 drops in comparison to a lot of the other decks. So you can see there's 1 Recruiter of the Guard here, there's 1 Sanctum Prelate, there's 1 Crusader, and then the normal Flicker Wisps. That's it for 3 drops. Whereas in the build I was playing, I was really heavy on that 2-drop slot. This one does run the Palace Jailer for a little extra utility, and there's not a lot of flair here. Of note, Joshua here is also running the 2 Orzhov Pontiffs, which people seem to like quite a bit, although doing so is very ambitious with his mana base. So he only has 2 Cavern of Souls in order to cast this. Otherwise, he is relying purely on Aether Vial to put them in. He also only has 1 Recruiter of the Guard, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Like, if you're going to go and, like, play Orzhov Pontiff, which is, like, this super amazing, stalemate-breaking card, then I think you'd really want another Recruiter in order to go get that. Like, similarly, if you're going to run, like, a Prelate and a Palace Jailer and a Mirran Crusader in the main as one-ofs, like, why not jam another Recruiter in there and, like, get more utility out of your bullets? You know, sort of similarly, playing a Fairy Macabre while, like, only having 1 Recruiter. Like, I don't like Fairy in the first place, but if you're going to do it, like, run 2 or 3 Recruiters so that you can consistently do that as a plan. There's a ton of Delver that made day 2 and fairly little check pile. Avenger seems good there. Yeah, like, I love Avenger against Delver. Like, Avenger is disgustingly good against Delver. Like, it trades with Delver, it gets aggressive, walls things like Young Pyromancer and tokens. Yeah, you know, smaller threats can't attack into it. It's got Vigilance. Like, there's a lot that I love about Serra Avenger. I just don't like it when I'm facing down a whole bunch of Baleful Strix. Like, that gets old really, really quickly. I've been looking at 1 fetch, 1 scrubland, 2 cavern splash for Pontiff. Yeah. I've got a math article about that, but if you want to actually cast the Pontiff, you really need 4 sources to reliably do it on turn 4, to cast it either on turn 4 or put it in by turn 4 with Ether Vial. And more is always better. Alright, so let's look at the next list. This one is by Eddie Leza, question mark. I'll probably get random people's names wrong that I don't know. This was 10th place at the Open. So again, 9th place and 10th place at the Constructed Open were both D&T decks. D&T had a good day with 2 in the top 8, and then the 2 decks right outside of top 8 were D&T as well. That's pretty insane. This is another mono-white build that kind of hedges in a couple of directions by playing a couple of different one-ofs. So, you see a one-of Palace Jailer, Sanctum Prelate, Serra Avenger in sort of the flex slots of this deck. So it's not hedging in any one direction terribly, like a lot of other builds do, but it's just got sort of good generic utility. And similarly, we have Cavern of Souls and Horizon Canopies as one-of to round out the mana base. Again, all reasonable there. I thought the sideboard here was interesting. You see a 2-2 split of Fairy and Rest in Peace. I've talked about this many times, but I really like Surgical over Fairy as a whole for the metagame. I think Fairy is better against Red-Black Reanimator, but not much else. So it's interesting to see someone run 2 Fairies. A lot of times it's a one-of tutor target for people that like it, but 2 is interesting. And also interesting is the Holy Light here. So in these other deck lists, we saw Orzhov Pontiff, we saw Orzhov Pontiff again in 2 of those top lists here, and we see someone else playing Holy Light. So a lot of people have their eye on some sort of board wipe or pseudo board wipe effect for the format right now, whether that's as a way to deal with True Name in particular, or whether it's just a response to things like Check Pile going and playing a bunch of X1 creatures and trying to kill you with those, or whether it's out of fear of elves. It's hard to say. But 3 of these top decks are all running a sweeper effect of some nature, which isn't really stock in the lists. You also see a Disenchant here, in addition to Council's Judgment. I don't know if that's targeting any one particular deck. It seems like it would be good in the mirror, because this deck doesn't have something like Manriki, Gusari, or Sword of War and Peace to sort of break the mirror in that regard. So having 1 extra piece of removal for equipment or for Revokers or Vials seems fine in that regard. Oh, hey, Disgruntled, thanks for stopping by. Disenchant over Leonin Relic Order is interesting. Yeah, I've been more and more of a fan of Leonin Relic Order the more that I play with that card. I love the fact that it is a tutorable answer to Omniscience. And I know that sounds like something narrow to talk about, but I think that the Sneak and Show matchup had gotten so bad that having a way to attack that matchup was necessary due to its popularity. In case you haven't heard me talk about this before, just super briefly here, Omniscience is a problem card for D&T, and the fact that most Show and Tell decks are now main decking 3 of those stupid things has really warped that matchup's percentage. Alright. So this is the last deck list from the Constructed Open. This one is 20th place. So again, still a good finish, but there's a gap between the other deck lists and this one. It might not be a big gap, but a gap. So this is the Direfleet Daredevil build that has been sort of making a run around online. I'm not really convinced that this build is good. I think Direfleet Daredevil can do a lot of cute things, a lot of super interesting things, but I'm not convinced that it is of a consistent power level. There are going to be some times where it's oh, flash in Direfleet Daredevil off Vial, I'll reanimate your Chancellor of the Annex. Haha, I got you. And there'll be times where you get to get something absolutely disgusting that you're not supposed to be able to do with D&T. Game 1 Council's Judgmenting away your opponent's Planeswalker, or somehow getting to Culligan's Command your opponent's Baleful Strix and doing 2 damage to their Planeswalker in order to kill it. Like, there are a lot of really cool dream scenarios that can happen with that card, but a lot of times it's going to be something closer to, like, Flametongue Kavu or Necrotal, where it comes in, you pay an extra mana or 2, and you get to kill a creature. And honestly, that might be good enough, like, if we're being completely honest here. Like, with Flicker Wisp, you might have the opportunity to blink it and get another spell, but there's some tension. So, Darfleet Daredevil requires the graveyard to be active. Well, does that mean when you're boarding in Rest in Peace that you board the Daredevil out? Well, what if you have worse cards that you need to board out first? Is a 1/2 or a, excuse me 2/1? Yeah, is a 2/1 first striker good enough to keep in the deck when you're also boarding in Rest in Peace? It's awkward. So I actually went and recommended to someone who's going to try out a bunch of Direfleet Daredevils, hey, if you're going to try that, should you be running Rest in Peace, or should you be going to other Graveyard Hate instead? The issue I have with a card like Direfleet Daredevil is that we're playing a synergy-based deck, and that card isn't synergistic with our deck. So it's synergistic with Vial. Like, when you put that in off of Vial, and then you use your mana for the turn to Direfleet Daredevil, that feels pretty good. When you Flicker Wisp it and you use it again, that feels pretty good. But, like, there are some issues. Like, it's bad against an opposing Snapcaster Mage a lot of time, because, like, you can target an instant and they can Snapcaster their instant. Or, like, when Deathrite Shaman is in the format, eating a whole bunch of things out of graveyards, that can be really awkward too. Like, it's... when it is good, my god, is it going to be good and do some silly things. But I think the average performance of this card is a 2/1 first strike that also happens to cast, like, a Lightning Bolt or a Swords to Plowshares or something of that nature. So other than that card, most of the rest of this list is about what you would expect. There is the 3rd Magus of the Moon in the board, which was something that I've talked about as wanting to try, but I went up to the 3rd Recruiter instead. And again, we see someone else opting for the Orzhov Pontiff plan in the board. Okay, so now we're going to move on to deck lists from the Legacy Classic. So this is going to be a smaller event, but the results that we have from it are going to be from the Death and Taxes pilots only, not necessarily shaped by the rest of their team. So Steven's build here is a sort of very typical mono-white build in the main, but has opted for a couple of different creatures in the flex slots than normal. So, like, we see 2 Spirit of the Labyrinths here, 1 Sanctum Prelate, 1 Palace Jailer, and only 1 Crusader. This has sort of less ability to go and beat through an opposing Young Pyromancer, for example, because it lacks flyers and it lacks more first strike creatures. But this is a build that would be pretty good against a deck like, you know, Show and Tell or Ant that's reliant on cantrips to set up in the first couple of turns. I don't know if this has enough main deck oomph for my liking. Like, an opposing Tarmogoyf or something of that nature can be a real problem for a build like this, where in the early game, unless you have Stoneforge to go and set up equipment, like, your Thalias and your Spirit of the Labyrinths and your Revokers are all sort of going to be smaller than a realistic opposing threat that your opponent can have. Did I miss a deck list? Did I miss one from the open? Oh, I'm sorry. Alright, the sideboard here is sort of stock-ish. Again, someone opted for the Pithing Needle here in a flex slot, and a 2nd Containment Priest, as well as a Relic of Progenitus. Nothing too surprising in the sideboard. Like, it's a lot of the cards that we're used to seeing, but just in different numbers. Like, you can see a Crusader in the sideboard that's meant to compensate for some of the smaller threats in the main deck. Oh, yeah. Yes, yours was the first one I went over, I believe. Um, this video is going to get uploaded to YouTube later, so you can hear my thoughts. I didn't say a lot. Yeah, and so then we get to the last deck list, which is from the Classic as well. This one was 16th place. This one's weird. This one has, how do you say, the spice in it. Let's just start here in the Planeswalker category with an Elspeth Knight Errant. That intrigued me. So, I understand with check pile and miracles coming to the forefront of the format as the premier control decks, I understand wanting to run a Planeswalker in order to sort of grind against those sorts of effects. I'm sort of surprised that Elspeth was the choice over Gideon. Like, I understand Elspeth in a Mirran Crusader heavy build, because the ability to like jump Crusader turns Crusader into a 2-turn clock. But I'm sort of surprised that it was Elspeth over Gideon, sort of given everything else that was going on here. Also interesting is a one of Tower of the Magistrate. And I'm just going to read this one for those of you who don't know it. It taps for colorless mana, or for 1 colorless and tapping it. Target creature gains protection from artifacts until the end of turn. So what that means is your opponent in, say, the Mirror can go and equip their Stoneforge with Agite, attack in, and then you can Tower of the Magistrate their creature to make their equipment fall off. This is not a card that I think is playable. And I don't want to slight my, this person's deck building, but so many of the decks that are, playing equipment are also playing True Name, and True Name, this doesn't work on True Name since it targets a creature. So I don't think the cost of this card being colorless is going to be worth, A, making your mana worse, and B, leaving up mana in awkward spots in the Mirror and hoping this doesn't get wastelanded. I don't think that's gonna do it. And there's still something weird going on here. There's a sort of light and shadow in the main deck. Now that's something I've never seen. And I've played some weird D&T builds that are sort of oddly metagamed. I kind of wonder if there were some typographical errors with this list, because it seems really weird to run a 4th piece of equipment, which no one runs, and a Planeswalker, which no one runs, and only 23 lands when, running a Planeswalker in the main deck. So, I kind of wonder if, the Prelate and the Palace Jailer were supposed to be the main, and things got, messed up somewhere. But, operating under the assumption that this is the deck list as intended, there's a lot of weird things going on here. This is the only ones of the D&T lists that I really dislike. Tower might be with Baleful Strix in mind. Okay, that's not unreasonable. There are some random value creatures like Shardless Agent and Baleful Strix that, the Tower can push you through. That is a thing that can happen. We're still not convinced that it's enough. Sure. Also, Walking Ballista. Yeah, tell me how that works. Walking Ballista, shoot your mom. I'll give it in protection. In response, I'll shoot your mom again. Oh, I'm sad. But otherwise, I liked a lot of these lists. There were interesting things going on. Again, I didn't talk about Travis Brown's list too much because I'm gonna have him do a write-up of his event a little bit later on. No promises on exact date on that, but probably expect that within a week or two. All right, Chad, I'm going to give you a minute if you want to ask any questions or comment about anything at all from these lists from the Open. I'm happy to answer those questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go through and do a league with red-white taxes. So while I wait for the chat to type anything they want to say, for anyone who wasn't here right at the start of this, I'm going to go ahead and run 2 Vryn Wingmares in my current build, dropping the Rest in Peace that I was running just to try that out, because I've been very happy with Vryn Wingmare stacking with Thalia against a bunch of the blue decks of the format. And I also am running a 3rd Recruiter of the Guard in the sideboard. How do I feel about only 2 Wisp and 1 P&K at the Flyers in the Mardu Taxes list? I think that's scary. Like, I really like having a good number of Flyers in the deck. So, like, if we look at my build right now, I have 3 Wisps, 2 Wingmare, and 2 P&K total, as well as 3 Recruiters that can go and find all of those. That gives me a lot of different ways to block a Delver, which is something that I really care about at the end of the day. And I also don't want to get stonewalled by opposing decks. Where was that Spirit of the Labyrinth build? So, like, Steven's deck list here, if you look at this was a mono white one, but, like, it has 4 Flicker Wisps as the only Flyers in it. And when you're trying to rely on a bunch of, like, little ground critters like Thalia, Spirit, Stoneforge, Revoker to push your damage, that can be really worrisome. And so similarly, a red-white build that is cutting down to just, like, 2 Flicker Wisps, and then the P&K, which is really hard to cast in the first place. Like, you do have a certain fear of being pecked to death by a Delver or getting involved in a board stall. Painter's Servant plus Absolute Gracio. Alternative combos, yep. Yeah, and that's another issue. So someone in the chat just said, you know, I'm also worried about True Name Nemesis, and that's something that I've been bringing up a lot. If you go really heavy on ground-based critters, then True Name becomes a problem. And True Name is always a little bit of a problem, but if you have Flyers, if you have things like Flicker Wisps and Sarah Avengers and Vryn Wingmares to go over it, you don't necessarily care about it stalling the board quite as much. So True Name is always bad. True Name plus equipment usually ends up being unbeatable. But if you're playing against a True Name deck and they just, like, play True Name, and you're sitting there with, like, Thalia, Mirran Crusader, Stoneforge, and the wrong piece of equipment, and you can't push through, it's really rough. All right. So I played a little bit yesterday, but I wasn't quite up for streaming. I wasn't sure how much time I was going to have in any one sitting. So just to tell you about my results with this yesterday, I had a 5-0 with wins against Miracles, Check Pile, Sneak and Show, Bug Delver, and, like, I call it Aggro Mud. There have been a couple of names floating around for it, but, like, the colorless deck that's running, like, Steel Overseer, Arcbound Ravager, Phyrexian Revoker, a bunch of equipment, Hangerback Walker, and things of that nature. So I had a 5-0 with that. Pretty happy with that, as well as a 3-2 finish. Let's see what the 3-2 was. So that was the 3-2 round was beat Miracles, Sneak and Show, and Big Eldrazi, and lost to Rest in Peace Helm combo that was, like, blue-white control, and Belcher. So the Belcher loss was expected, and the Rip Helm match was close. So pretty happy with this exact build, and I'm going to go ahead and just get into it. I talked for a little longer than I planned to on this deck list, but I thought there was a lot of noteworthy stuff there of different natures. I also didn't really want to take the time to write that all out in article form, but I wanted to, like, say it and get it out there. Alright, here we go. Misha 64. And looks good. See if I have any data on my opponent. No data on my opponent. So we will just keep a reasonable hand. Alright, we're red right taxes. We're on the play. Playing against Misha 64. Can remove this draw step. Stop. I guess we'll probably see my opponent brainstorm here, as tends to happen when I cast a Thalia. So my opponent is fetching an Underground Sea in the face of me playing a Wasteland. That makes me think that they don't actually have basics in their deck. Alright, Thalia resolved. Feeling good. Moon will indeed be fun. I would like Moon to happen. I would also like my opponent to not play like Stoneforge Mystic here. I don't like seeing Marsh Flats. That tends to be played in like Stoneblade decks, which I think is a pretty rough matchup. Yeah, there it is. Alright, so my opponent gets a Jitte. So, absolutely no thinking. I am going to Wasteland my opponent. I need to keep them off of playing a True Name Nemesis and then getting there with Jitte. That is on the absolutely needs to happen category. Sort of unfortunate, because I would really love to just, like, play Recruiter, get Magus, slam Magus, and use my mana efficiently in that way, but I don't think I can take the risk of my opponent playing a True Name in the interim, because if they play True Name, cast Jit, equip Jit on the following turns, like, I'm done. So Tundra goes bye-bye. And then I have a couple of options, like I can just play the Mom to get protection, which is not the worst idea, or I can get Stoneforge Mystic and try to get my opponent's Stoneforge off the table with my own Jitte. Since I'm pressuring my opponent's mana so much, I actually just want to take the turn to get a Mom in play. Although I would not fault anyone for taking an alternative line on that turn. Like, just getting aggressive with the Stoneforge is perfectly reasonable as well. But I would like to invalidate Swords to Plowshares and Friends right now, as well as just get this Mom on board to protect against a Jitte hit. Yeah, so getting Sword of Fire and Ice will be what I will be doing with the Stoneforge, probably on my turn. If my opponent misses a land drop, we'll see. I am... Oh, alright. Drawing a land is nice. So I have to decide whether or not I want to attack with Thalia. If my opponent has a Batterskull and a piece of removal, then like they can block the Thalia, I protect, and then they remove the Mom on my turn, and I can be in really bad shape. I kind of like just going for the 2-turn I'm going to Moon You plan. because I can't really, like, if my opponent has another land Jitte, I can't really stop that from happening. Although I could just go and get something like a Stoneforge Mystic, go and get Sword of Fire and Ice, hope to draw land, cast Sword of Fire and Ice. Yeah, I'm not gonna attack. I'm gonna play Control here. And cast Recruiter. So this holds back both Athalia and the Mother of Runes for a potential attacker. And we're getting the Moon Man. I'm getting Moon Man over something like a Revoker to just go and stop the Jitte, because I'm sort of afraid of a True Name Nemesis. So I'm going to give them this turn to go land True Name. Otherwise, if this Magus resolves, my opponent is not going to have the opportunity to do that. And I'm pretty confident that even if my opponent gets something like a Batterskull in play, that I can beat that with my hand. Like, I have multiple Stoneforges here. Alright, there's a Batterskull. Good stuff. And if my opponent attacks in, I will just take this hit from Batterskull. I'm not particularly scared of this card right now. I just don't want to open myself up to, like, this mom disappearing right now. And I don't feel like I need to jump block with a Recruiter quite yet. I'd like to keep that around as a potential Flicker Wisp target. That's annoying. No, I'm not going to give protection from black. I don't want to open myself up to a removal spell. Get Wastelanded off Plateau, draw a second Magus. Bleh. So if I were to block and my opponent had something like a Swords to Plowshares, like, yes, I would get to block, I wouldn't take the Germ off the battlefield, and then I would lose my mom, and I do not want to lose my mom. And now all the comments from the chat are coming through about how sad we are. Yup. Right now, my Batterskull beats their Batterskull. So I'm going to go ahead and do that since I have another Stoneforge. The second Stoneforge will go and get Sword of Fire and Ice to beat their True Name if they end up doing that. Now I'm in this really awkward spot where, like, if my opponent equips, I'm forced to, like, block and protect. But luckily, if my opponent equips, they also cannot use a removal spell on my creature this turn, but the following turns that won't be true. This smells like my opponent has True Name Nemesis, so I'm going to block and get value out of blocking while I can. Like, if my opponent didn't equip this Jitte this turn, then that really seems to me like they're just going to slam a True Name here, and protecting my life total is going to matter. Again, not just going to protect, because I am really terrified of any removal spell right now. Don't do it. Don't true name. Just let me draw Cavernous Souls, slam Magus, and then slowly stabilize this game. Okay, Baleful Strix is pretty annoying. That flies. Hey guys, you remember how we were talking about before about how good flying is? It's terrifying. Alright, Wasteland is not what I want. It's a good start, but I'm pretty far from being able to deal with my opponent's board right now. Yeah, I believe that we have lost this game at this point. I'll continue to play things out, but things are pretty much over, because I'm going to lose both my Thalia and my mom this turn. I'll get to go and put in my own Batterskull, but like I'm not going to be able to trade with my opponent's Batterskull unless they're bad and they attack in this turn with it, which would be great for me. So I am hoping to draw Phyrexian Revoker. That would be good. The Swords to Plowshares would buy time, but doesn't particularly get me out of my spot. My opponent's thinking. I don't know why. So if I just tap his land, like, that is a line I can take. But if he has another land, I am probably so far helplessly behind that I will never come out of it. Whereas with the way I'm taking, I guess I can wait on that for a second. With the way I'm taking, if my opponent does have the land, I still have a Batterskull in play when everything else hits the fan. Like, my opponent happened to not have the land, but, like, say I port them and they didn't equip this turn, they still get to poke me one with one for Baleful Strix, and I'm still in this situation for the rest of the game where I'm super, super terrified of my opponent just drawing a land. Like, the most common draw in their deck. So I think I have to, like, take this opportunity to get the Batterskull in. Alright, so there's a chance. I'll be super sad if they, like, Jitte counter, kill Thalia, Force of Will this Revoker. Ugh, why did I even say it, chat? Why did I even say it? I want to offer them a trade for their Germ token. if I don't take this trade here, once like my opponent gets Jitte counters, I won't be able to make this trade again because my opponent can just kill it with Jitte. So I think I actually just like gave my opponent the opportunity to make a mistake there, and they did. My opponent makes a good attack with the Stoneforge Mystic there. If I blocked, it would let my opponent just use one Jitte counter to get rid of the Stoneforge. Oh, it's bobbing there too. Neat. So at this point, I am essentially playing for more information. I accept the fact that I have lost this game. My opponent's at 26. I don't think we're going to get the Bob win. Opponent reveals Stoneforge Mystic. Maybe they flip Emrakul. I need them to flip like Emrakul and then Draco or something. That's the sort of outs we're looking at. I also don't like to concede against Stoneblade online because it is a very real possibility that you time your opponent out. And I know that sounds terrible to say, and it is not behavior that mimics real life play, but Moto and Paper Magic are different things. Like even talking to the chat, I'm over 2 minutes ahead of my opponent now on clock. So. Okay. Marsh Flats. So, like, whoever suggests the, like, maybe I port them so that they don't get to do anything with their Jitte line. So that would have been, like, 4 cards deep where I would have continued porting them. I would have continued getting hit with Baleful Strix, and I wouldn't have done anything meaningful with my own board, given the draws I had. So, like, just in case you were curious thinking that might work out, not so much. All right, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... Yeah, so I made the play that I did thinking that my opponent was just going to try to clock me out with Baleful Strix. On the magical chance that I, like, draw something relevant, and it matters, this gets my opponent's other card advantage engine off the table. I am just dead to this Strix on the next turn, though. So I need something like Swords to Plowshares or Vryn Wingmare in order to get this off the table, and then the Jitte is still a problem after that. Is Dark Confidant an inclusion in most of these types of deck? No. No, that's rare. So I normally tend to board out Swords to Plowshares against these sorts of decks, but since my opponent has multiple copies of Dark Confidant, I probably won't do that. Alright, so we're playing against Deathblade, we're on the play, and we lost. And we really lost to Jitte. And in addition to losing to Jitte, we lost to a Wasteland on Plateau. So, that was really brutal. Alright, good luck at your local game. Thanks for stopping in for a few. Okay, so what are we going to do here? Hello, hello. Thank you for dropping by, Starstreak. We just lost game 1 against a Deathblade deck that is also playing Dark Confidant. I think I'm going to be sideboarding relatively light here. So normally in sort of the various Stoneblade matchups, I start by trimming all of my Swords to Plowshares and going from there. But my opponent is playing a Deathblade deck that also has a bunch of Dark Confidants. And so I'm not entirely sure if that means they also don't have True Name, and like that's what they're doing instead of those slots, or if that's something that's in addition. It's something that I've got to keep in mind. I've got to think about what I want to remove. Because like usually I just go to these, cut those, and then like that's all my sideboarding is. Hey, thank you for stopping by as well. Yeah, things are going relatively well, although we're playing against Deathblade, so that's not the greatest. P and K is going to be cast if my opponent... It's going to be hard to cast if my opponent is on a Wasteland deck. So I'll probably start by removing that. I think this is going to be the sort of matchup where I'd really like to leave my Vial on 3, and Jailer is very risky if my opponent is on a True Name deck. And then I have to trim 1 card. It might just be like 1 Wingmare. This hand is reasonable. Like, it needs another land to function well. But, like, it has a turn 1 interactive play for a Deathrite Shaman. It has a Thalia as a follow-up play. Like, that's all fine and good. It has a Revoker for a piece of equipment. Like, I can interact on a lot of levels with this hand. Although it is not one of the more powerful hands that I can have in this matchup. I would love my opponent to keep a 1-lander with the Deathrite Shaman and just get totally wrecked. That would be great. If this Magus resolves, we get to win the game. So that's great. Alright, you ponder. Really, really, really hoping to draw another land. Because, like, if I have to fetch on my turn, I have to decide whether or not I want to get a Plains to play around my own Magus or a Plateau to cast the Magus. And that's a tough choice. And a choice that I'm making right now. Opponent did not shuffle with Ponder. I'm going to go ahead and just get a Plains. I have enough cards in hand that require white mana that I don't think I can take the risk of just, like, getting the Plateau. Cavern of Souls would be best draw off the top of the deck. There's that Stoneforge Mystic, being annoying. There's a Jitte, alright. So, I don't care about this Stoneforge, really. The only way I care about it is if my opponent also has Batterskull in hand, like they happened to last game. In my ideal world, I kill this Stoneforge. My opponent taps out for, you know, say a True Name Nemesis, and then I stick this Magus of the Moon if I draw a red source. That's kind of my ideal world. So I can preemptively Revoker Jitte, but that's likely to eat a removal spell. So I think I'm just going to Swords the Stoneforge. Kind of hoping that if my opponent plays another non-True Name card and I draw a land that's not white, I can Mom and Plow in the same turn. Again, I don't want to take the chance that my opponent just dumps a Batterskull into play when I'm kind of riding on winning with this Magus with my hand the way it is. Alright, another Stoneforge. Alright. Still really hoping to draw a land. Oh, great. It's a wasteland. Everything's gone terribly, chat. Ah, there's that plateau that would have let me cast the Magus. So again, kind of priced into the same play from the previous turn. We're not dead yet. We're just very badly burned. Please don't have more creatures. Like, my opponent just slamming. Okay. I don't care about whatever this is, probably. Baleful Strix. I don't... that is annoying. That means my plan of, like... We get to buy a lot of time, but I really need to draw some lands here. On a number of different levels. It's fine. Like, my opponent is just gonna, like, Zealous Persecution me at some point anyway and get rid of both of these, and I'll just, like, cry. And that's how we'll start off this league. Alright, well, I just slam Magus here. Like, I'm not... So if my opponent has a 2-mana removal spell, then they can actually, like, cast it this turn by floating mana, which is awkward. I could like, take a turn to get a Mom in play and play a second Revoker on Jitte, and then slam the Magus, so it's safe. Or I can just jam the Magus. If my opponent doesn't have a 1-mana removal spell, then the upside on resolving Magus is really, really huge. I guess I kind of want the Mom and the second Revoker, though, because, like, if my opponent has a removal spell, they point it at Jitte they point it at Revoker instead, and then slam a Jitte. Yeah. Alright, I've talked myself into the right line. No, I don't think Magus beats what I just talked about. Swords to Plowshares on Thalia over Mom is interesting. That might mean that they have multiple removal spells, or are hoping to draw another removal spell off Bob. Ah, there's a Swords to Plowshares off Bob. Wonderful. Yeah, Moxall, we're never beating Zealous Persecution or Marsh Casualties. We're not playing around those. We just lose to those. That is accepted fate. So I'm kind of hoping that my opponent taps low or out this turn, and then I get to slam the Moon Man. Alright, yeah, there's the Zealous Persecution that we were never going to beat. Yeah, we're dead. So, if we played the Moon Man last turn, then my opponent got to like remove it with the Swords to Plowshares, and then the Zealous Persecution wipes our board anyway. So like, we weren't beating what they have going on anyway. I think I'm just going to like straight up pass the turn and hope to draw a Revoker or some other way to deal with the Jitte. I don't want to just like throw these two toughness creatures into their Jitte right now. Yeah, as soon as my opponent plays like one more card that matters, I'll probably concede. We're not dead yet, but we're like sub 10% to win this game. Like if my opponent goes and casts something like a Jace that can bounce any creature that I play, like I'll concede to that. Or if my opponent reveals any relative hate card, I will concede to that as well. Not too worried about this one. I almost always lose this matchup. Or like really any Stoneblade matchup I think is a tough matchup right now. Yeah, that's probably good enough to make me concede as well. Like, I'm gonna just drown in card advantage. Yeah, that's fine. So play and loss. So game 2, loss to Jitte and Zealous Persecution. Good combo of cards is good. Back in the queue we go. For those of you that joined in a little bit later, never mind, we'll do that song and dance later. We're just getting right back in there. I played against this player recently. J. Meyer, 2030. On Grixis Delver. Oh man, this poor guy. The last time I played against him, I just moonmanned him twice and he died. On the draw, I have Magus, and I potentially get to Magus out this guy again after I Magused him 2 times before previously. Snapkeep. And is great. Uh-oh. Wait. Oh, my opponent is like, I was real scared for a second that it might just, like, be Infect. I'm not scared anymore. Oh, no. I've been given the terrible choice of, do I just stick this vial, or do I want to Swords the Deathrite? My opponent didn't lead on a fetch, which kind of wants to make me just go like Wasteland, Vial, and then on my next turn, Swords and Waste You. And if they have a fetch land, they can have one turn to deal with this. I'm pretty sure he's on Delver. Like, I played against him, like, just a day or 2 ago. Like, it's possible he switched, but I like the chances that he is still on Delver. I don't think it matters with this hand. Like, this hand is great against either. Oh man, my opponent does not get a fetch land. So sort of awkwardly, I will get to fetch with Flooded Strand to get the land to plow the Deathrite, and then give him 1 more mana in doing so. Which hopefully doesn't matter. But like, it'd be super, super awful if he had something like a Spell Pierce. And assuming that he is Grixis Delver, we'll just take him off of the red source. And now we're set up to just win this game with Magus in 2 turns, relatively handily. Sorry, my door is creaking. I'm going to try to stop that. It's super annoying. I did not successfully stop it. Alright, stifle check. This is great. Like, we conveniently get to go and get a second Plains here. That was a great draw. And I'm going to cast this Jitte to give my opponent something to counter. Like, Stoneforge fetching Batterskull is good enough. Alright, opponent does not have counter spells either. Life is not good over there in opponent land. Alright. It could be check pile, like someone was talking about. Oh, it's still my main phase. You didn't do that at my end step. I see. Leovold, you bet, sir. You bet. Hey, IoT went 5-0 with Daredevil. Time to have a go too. No, I don't. I don't think I'm quite ready to test that yet. Like, there have been a couple of people doing it, but even the people who are playing it are like, yeah, sometimes it does cool things, but it's usually just Necrotol. Might be good enough. All right, game 1 result, win. And I am now of the opinion that my opponent is on check pile, since we saw that Badlands in the Leo. All right, so game 1, Magus. Magus, great card. Moon Man. Yeah, he's bros. I mean, I know I've talked about him a lot, but really, he is worth all the praise I'm giving him. All right, so we're gonna board out Swords to Plowshares. It's not particularly good. Palace Jailer is a little bit risky. Revoker's not particularly reviable as a way to shut off Planeswalkers since they have so much spot removal, and I usually trim a Flicker Wisp. So what this means is that the Rest in Pieces are here as sort of pseudo-removal spells for Death Rights, and to diminish the value of Snapcaster Mage, which is really one of their best cards against us. Like, the first Culligan's Command is awful, the second one is basically unbeatable. So like, if we do a sort by converted mana cost, even though I'm boarding out all of these ones, since I'm replacing them with, like, essentially with Rest in Pieces as alternative removal spells, that's a great start as like alternate removal that gets us more value. Flicker Wisp is really, really good, but since they have so much removal and since they can attack our vials too, we're not always necessarily going to get the value we want off of them. Especially if my plan is just jam Magus every time, casting Flicker Wisp can be hard. I got dumpstered out of the Legacy tournament, went 2-3, lost a lands, pile, and mono black reanimator, but I beat Infect 2-0 and beat Burn. Hey, that's fine. Alright, my opponent mulliganed, and we have a hand that has a Magus of the Moon in it. So, keep. I do need one more land to make this hand work, but I'm not too worried about that happening. Especially since my opponent didn't lead on Deathrite Shaman here. I don't tend to speculate much anymore. Sort of brief Phil history lesson. I was a poor student in grad school when I started playing Legacy, so at first I actually went to a lot of opens purely to trade. So I actually sort of ground my collection from the floor up. So for a long time, I was a trade grinder rather than a real competitive player. And I'm really glad the days where I care about Magic Finance are over. Fork Bolt, Deathrite Shaman. That is a great turn for my opponent. Less so in the face of me playing this Rest in Peace. Good sideboard cards are good. Oh, and it just resolves too. Great. I also really like that my opponent used a red removal spell on my mom instead of a different colored removal spell. That makes it less likely that they can actually answer the Moon Man once it hits play. Can confirm, new Phil in college, he grinded the trade floors a lot. Yeah, like I would go to like DC and Baltimore Opens and just literally like ride the metro there in the morning, spend all day trading, not play a single game of Magic other than like maybe a random game of EDH or something on the side. And like that was my day. Do I want to wait a turn to like play a Mom first before this Magus, or do I just jam it into Fatal Push? That's a real question. Or like I can Wingmare this turn, continue to sort of soft lock them on the mana, and then try to hard lock them at Magus. This turn's tough. I'm not really in a... Phil, could you do a stream and show us your physical deck? I would love that. Yeah, sure. It's mostly foreign. I'll at the very least post a picture of it somewhere. If we had played some Legacy after either Chris Hawker or I scrubbed out of an open, accurate. I want to play Wingmare this turn. Again, I'm going to just try to bait a couple of removal spells out of my opponent. Yeah, like, if my opponent has a Fatal Push... Oh, no 2-mana removal spell. Or, excuse me, no 1-mana removal spell there. That's great for us. That's a shame, because that would have mean the Magus would have just resolved and won the game, mostly, if it happened. So the only card I'm worried about my opponent, like, my opponent has to have 2 cards for me to be scared about what they have. They have to have a black-producing land or a fetch land and him to Torok and hit this Magus. Otherwise, I'm not concerned with what they do. Oh, no Revolt for push. Okay, yeah, that's fair. But, like, it's also very unlikely that my opponent has Lightning Bolt either, because the Wingmare would have gotten Lightning Bolted. Bitter Blossom. Neat. That's fine. I can beat a Bitter Blossom with what I have pretty easily. Oh, opponent has a swamp. Interesting. Alright, so we got a little bit punished by not playing the Magus last turn. But I'm not actually that worried. So, like, assuming I draw another land and I can just go land, Jete, equip, this game's in really good shape. Yeah, well, there we go. Opponent is F6'd. Alright, opponent just scoops it up there despite having a Bitter Blossom. Like, I don't know if they should have scooped, because, like, if they draw a Culligan's Command, they can Culligan's Command, like, blow up the Jitte, make me discard my last card, and, like, maybe there's some hope that they can aggro me out after that. But hey, I'm not complaining. Alright, so we're on the draw for that one, and we win. Game 2, Magus. Like, that poor guy. I have played 2 matches with him in, like, probably the past 48 hours or something like that, where he has maybe, in total, gotten to play, like, 12 turns of Magic, because, like, every time, all 4 times I played him, I just mooned him, and that was that. Magus of the Moon is a really tilting card, and that's something to consider in deck building. Like, there are some people where they get mooned, and they're just like, why are you playing that card? Don't you want to play fun, interactive Legacy? Is this how you want to get your wins? And they just, like, spiral down this terrible circle of depression, and they tilt. And that leads to a lot of early concessions. Or it leads to people playing worse Magic than they are capable of playing. Man, Qs are just, like, going super fast. Oh, God. We got paired against him again, chat. Oh, that's great. I'm going to keep this hand. I am keeping this because I know what my opponent is playing, and, like, having PNK against check pile is just stupid. Alright, no counterspell from my opponent. And if my opponent does something like leads on Deathrite, and I get to, like, Swords the Deathrite, wasteland their first land, this Vial is going to just do disgusting things to them. Alright, they get the Thoughtseize me. I don't actually care that much about that. Because, like, I'm just going to wasteland them and let the Vial do work. And with our luck, we'll just draw the Moon Man and get him. Interesting, taking the Flicker Wisp. I do have good cards, and my opponent left me with a great card. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we waste them. They might think they're safe from mana denial, and then I'll port them. Yeah, that was kind of a gross draw, I'm not gonna lie. It's unfortunate my opponent played a fetch, but whatever. Yeah, I'm so surprised I got to keep PNK. It's like silly, honestly. Like, they must have a Culligan's Command and somehow think that they're going to get to Culligan's Command this Vial away. Hey guys, look. My opponent's gonna get a swamp here. Calling it. Alright. Baleful Strix, sure. So I'm just getting Batterskull here instead of Sword and Fire and Ice, because I have like my card advantage in the form of P and K already. So I just and Jailer too. This is gross. So I'm actually really tempted to just like port my opponent out of this game, but that's probably ambitious. Like, I'll put this Wingmare in, I'll put the Batterskull in, and then I will plan on not casting a spell for the rest of the game. Then just, like, port my opponent forever. And it's really nice that this Wingmare prevents them from Culligan's commanding. Second Baleful Strix is a little annoying because that trades with the Germ token. That's fine. We'll do this the hard way. Ah, you see, you thought it was going to be P and K, but no, not at all. 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 puts them to 9. And then I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I have 9 the following turn. Yeah, so I'll just port them. Port them off black so they can't do something like pay a bunch of life for a Toxic Deluge. Alright, sure, Lightning Bolt Palace Jailer. So I have 4, 5, 6, 7 damage showing. If I draw a land, then I can like put in P and K and just shoot them for the last 2. Yep, they scoop it up. Alright, on the play, we win. So what really won us that game? Like, it's hard to say, but it's like, I guess it was really the Vial. Like, Vial plus Wasteland really set them back. Yeah, that is a Monarch token. You can't interact with it in any way, so it's not like bugged. So again, we'll sideboard just like we did last match. Worked out pretty well last time. Will probably work out pretty well this time. So again, in case you weren't here, that's Swords to Plowshares out, Revokers out since they're not reliable, Palace Jailer out because it's a little risky, although it was fantastic in that exact scenario, and a Flicker Wisp out. D&T is cool and all, but whoa, let's focus on Plup winning Genesis 5. I have some videos to watch, Nick. I love me some Plup. Wow. This hand is great. We will keep it. It has Vial and a bunch of things to do. We would love for this Vial to stick around. Even if it doesn't, the hand is still slow, but fine. Mardu taxes list from the open. Jeez, I hate that it's called Mardu. I hate it so much. But it's not like I can blame any one particular person in my chat for that naming convention catching on. Wait a second. Yeah, so Nick, at the beginning of this video, I actually broke down all of the D&T lists, and I gave my thoughts on them. There was a lot of really interesting things going on at the Open in terms of the D&T lists. Yeah, I should really watch like the entire Genesis top 8. Like I don't know if this is something I've talked about on stream, but I was a semi-competitive Smash Brothers player for a number of years. In undergrad, I traveled around a bit to play Brawl, and then in grad school, nobody played Brawl anymore because like I went to the University of Maryland, which is really close to Xanadu, where VG Boot Camp was based out of for a long time. Still is. I guess only the Magic side of that closed down. So I got into Melee when I was in grad school, and so I play at a relatively high level. But not enough where like I traveled to tournaments for it or anything like that. Yes, so as soon as this stream... Oh! I looked away and my opponent played a Jitte. That's terrifying. Alright, that's real bad. Anyway, I got like halfway through that. But yeah, I upload all of my videos to YouTube when I'm done. Alright, so I'm going to try to port my opponent and buy some time. So, like, the good news is that if I keep my opponent from getting too many Jitte counters, like, the combination of, like, Recruiter, Flicker Wisp, Crusader should be able to deal with things. But if my opponent goes, like, land, Jitte, equip this turn, I might be in trouble. What's the YouTube? It is ThrabenU University. It is linked to on my website. Alright, so my opponent saw the obvious play that I was going to talk about. But he just did it. So here's the link, and the link to my YouTube is in that article. This is actually fine. So it was actually this video that I'm Oh, I boarded out all of the revokers. That's okay. That's okay. We're just going to get a Flicker Wisp then. Yeah, so this video has the breakdown of all the SCG events, like deck lists. So what I'm hoping for is that my opponent attacks with this Deathrite and I get to ambush it with Thalia. It looks like that's what's happening. The Thalia might get removed. But if it doesn't, oh boy, am I in great shape. Alright, Fatal Push, sure. So Chaka, I agree with that. I forgot that I boarded out all of my recruiters. So thinking I still had or excuse me, all my revokers. Thinking I still had a revoker in the deck, I was going to like recruiter for revoker, make it look like I was going to revoker and have a card up to ambush. So we're insulated from the Jitte for a little while, which is nice. I have to decide if I want to like slam this P and K right now, or if I just want to play the Crusader. I'm just going to play the Crusader. It's less mana efficient, but I like having that guy in play. I would like to find a Caracas before I play this P and K. Alright, you have a Snapcaster Mage. Targeting Ponder. Okay. Ponder is fine. Find the Lightning Bolt. No. Thought sees me. Okay. Since I have double Flicker Wisp, I'm fine with just letting that first one resolve without making a move. My opponent probably has to take the P and K here, despite the fact that the Flicker Wisps are going to be annoying. And I'm going to do a play that looks bad here, but is actually very important. I'm going to let my opponent kill a Flicker Wisp with a Jitte counter in order to make it so that Snapcaster Mage can't be pumped using the Jitte counter that's there. If my opponent's able to pump the Snapcaster Mage up to 3 toughness, then that means that it can get through my Crusader, or at least get Jitte counters that will allow my Crusader to die. Oh boy. Oh boy. We did it. Alright. And the opponent scoops it up. That was nice draw. That was nice. I enjoyed that. Alright, so game 2, opponent had Jitte, which is a little bit of an odd inclusion in that deck, but not unprecedented. But we won the Jitte War. Wow. That was... Don't need Spoon Man now! No, we did not. Okay, I'm going to run to the restroom real quick. I'm going to go ahead and leave my deck list up here for just a second. For those of you that didn't see it at the beginning of the stream, I know someone had asked about it. This is what I am working with today. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and in about 30 seconds, I'll be happy to answer them. Alright, here we go. Once more, into the abyss. So all of you, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU University, and I'm streaming some Red, White, Death, and Taxes. If you haven't already and you're enjoying my content, please follow me, and if you're a really big D&T enthusiast, you know, feel free to subscribe and directly support my efforts. I'll be messaging someone after the stream today in order to sort of make progression on my emote, and should have a stream overlay in the not-too-distant future as well. As far as ThrabenU University content goes, I'll be having 2 guest articles in the next couple of weeks that should be pretty fun and different perspectives from my own. Alright, we are playing against Tilted Pod. Hand looks weak. See if I have any data about this opponent. Looks like they were seen playing lands a while back and an Eldrazi deck more recently. My opponent is double queuing. So if my opponent is on an Eldrazi deck, then like this Wasteland is good, this Flicker Wisp is okay, but the rest of his hand is kind of mediocre. My opponent is on lands. This hand sucks. Like, if my opponent is playing Eldrazi, the like mom portion of this hand is really bad, and I'm too land heavy. But like sometimes you just get them with Wasteland. But like more generally against most of the format, I don't like this hand. Like this is the sort of hand where if I draw like a Thalia, a Stoneforge, a Magus, this hand becomes very good. But otherwise it's a little bit weak. I'm gonna keep this and really hope my opponent is actually on Eldrazi. So that I get to like waste their first land and hope that buys me enough time to draw out of this weak hand. If I had no data on my opponent, I would have mulliganed this hand. Alright, they are on Eldrazi. Alright, I'm just adjusting my spreadsheet here. Yeah, like, it is a really tough hand. So, like, I'm keeping it, hoping that that's good enough. So, like, I get this Flicker Wisp to kill this Endless one a couple of turns down the line. That's neat. So, like, the upside of this hand is that if we draw something like a Stoneforge or a Magus, then this hand became insane. And I'm not going to trade with this Endless one here, even though it's something that I can do, since I just intend on Flicker Wisping it. Like, drawing a Port would be pretty good, too. Spirit Guide into Matter Reshaper, maybe? Matter Reshaper, yeah. Opponent's hand seems to be a little weak as well if they're willing to use a Spirit Guide to put a Matter Reshaper out there. But hey, we just drew a Karakas, so it's not like we're doing much better. Well, because I'm hoping to trade the Moms for something better, or use the Moms as better speed bumps. Tempted to, like, just trade the Moms with the Matter Reshaper. Like, as bad as that is, I'm just trying to stabilize my life total right now. And if I take 5 here, and then my opponent even just plays something as simple as another Matter Reshaper, that's not the best for me. And if I'm going to trade anyway, I'm okay with just doing that now. It's awkward if my opponent flips a land, but if my opponent flips a spell, I don't really care about giving them the spell. Again, not a good trade, but we're not winning this match by sort of playing safe at this point. Ancient Tomb. That was about the literal worst that situation could go. Yep, alright. We're dead. Drawing Karakas Mom was indeed pretty bad. I will take one more draw step to see if I draw Palace Jailer. Thalia is late to the party. Yeah, alright, we weren't getting there this game. So it's sort of questionable whether that hand should have been a mulligan. A lot went wrong that game. We drew the literal worst cards we could have drawn. when I took a risk, we got punished when my opponent didn't have more lands by them hitting a soul land, which was a relatively low probability chance of happening. I still don't think the hand was necessarily a mulligan, since we had a wasteland. Like, for our 6 to be better than that, the 6 had to be pretty solid. Like, we took our opponent off an Eldrazi temple, and if we didn't take them off that temple, I would have just got, like, Thought Not Seared on turn 2 into Reality Smasher on turn 3, and I probably would have lost anyway. So, like, I think the keep was correct. Alright, so we lost. We'll be on the play for the next one. So, game 1, sort of lost to untimely matter reshaper, trigger, and 4 draws. Alright, so for the Eldrazi matchup, we have 3 Paths to Exiles. They're amazing. We have a Leonin Relic Order. It does things sometimes. And then we have some number of these 5 cards which might get boarded in. We start by boarding out Mother of Runes. It is, pretty much literally a dead card in this matchup. Most of our other cards are pretty good. I tend to trim about 2 Thalias in this matchup. I guess I can trim a Wingmare. Like, Thalia's First Strike is relevant in some scenarios. Like, it's not the best. It's a question of, do you want a card that can come down earlier and block small, endless ones and matter reshapers, or do you want a card that can fly and go over? Basic planes. Remind me in between games, and I will talk about that. Do I value Thalia or Wingmare more in this matchup? I think it's pretty similar. This hand is amazing. Assuming we don't get Chalice on 1, we have 3 removal spells. That's great. And even if we do get Chalice on 1, assuming we draw another land, we can just Flicker Wisp the Chalice and then go to town on their dudes. This is one of those hands where I will throw a Swords to Plowshares at literally any creature that they put on board. Even the weaker ones. Sorcerer Spyglass stopping our Windswept Heath is annoying. My opponent might Mize a game win off of that, in all honesty. So this is something I could have played around by fetching on turn 1 for planes, but you usually want to save your fetch lands for as long as you can in order to like figure out whether you need to get a basic with them or whether you need to get a plateau with them. So I don't regret not fetching on turn 1. Yeah, Sorcerer's Spyglass is gas. I don't know how many of you have actually played with that card before, but it frequently feels like cheating. Alright, my opponent gets a Thought Not me. He might just take my Flicker Wisp, which is a really good play. because if I draw another land at some point, I can flicker with the Sorcerous Spyglass and then fetch with the Windswept Heath. Nope, just starting on the line of Swords to Plowshares that's available. And I will Swords to Plowshares my opponent before I do anything else to see if I draw a Wasteland. More Swords to Plowshares action. No complaints on this end. Is there a place for Spyglass in D&T? No. The 1 mana versus 2 mana difference is huge. Like, we're not really even playing Pithing Needle right now. Like, the ability to play Sorcerer Spyglass on turn 1 off Ancient Tomb and, like, get your opponent's fetch lands if nothing else is going on is a really important upside that D&T doesn't have in playing this. Oh, all the removal. There's an argument that this isn't actually better than porting, but I really like having 1 more land in play. Thoughts on Blood Sun in Red Prison? Very interesting. So in the Red Prison deck, it doesn't necessarily work well with Blood Moon. It works sort of as its own card. So when you just Blood Sun and your opponent has a bunch of fetch lands, they do nothing. When you Blood Sun and Blood Moon, then all of a sudden they become mountains. So like you actually give them mana if you play a Blood Moon in addition. But the Blood Sun can do some silly things with your own lands. I'm not, like, I've been testing D&T, obviously, so I'm not 100% sure, like, which is better, or if they're different, or, like, how you go about doing all of that stuff. But Blood Sun is super interesting. What do you think about Ozer's Gateway and Chalice-based Prison decks as a card filter engine? I don't know what that card does. I have lots of lines available to me here. Oh, shoot, my opponent picked Rashad Port with the Sorcerer Spyglass when it came down a second time. I was looking at the chat and I didn't see that. Guess I'm not porting. I should have just played a Revoker. Oops. Fizzler, I'll look at what you're saying in the chat about that card in a minute. there is the classic bug where you path Reality Smasher, and sometimes the discarding card thing doesn't actually work, and you don't end up discarding a card. Super unfortunate for our opponent. So we'll attack with everything. My opponent will animate a Mishra's Factory. All swords it. Oh no, my opponent will not do that. Interesting. So my opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With one more land, my opponent can go 6, 7, and can't. Or no, I guess Ayavugan counts towards all his dust because his colorless Eldrazi spells. So that's 1, 2. Revoker is colorless. Why am I even thinking about that? I'm going to name Walking Ballista. That's the card that I'm most scared of on my opponent's board right now. Like, it's the only card that they can just cast and just completely wreck me, even if I hold up a Swords to Plowshares. Alright, so my opponent gets mana to do things. Alright, so my opponent scoops it up. So just so I have something to talk about, I'm going to look at this Ozer's Gateway card. Alright, 2-mana artifact, 1 tap, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand. Cards with 5 or more different converted mana costs are exiled. You flip it, untap it, and transform it. Alright. So you get to add X mana of any one color to your mana pool, where X is your life total. I don't think that's good. Like, the payoff for its flipping is not that good. Like, in the red prison decks, you always... Like, mana is not usually a concern once you hit around 4 mana. So, like, this flipping late game doesn't really matter unless you've been, like, wastelanded or ported a bunch or something like that. Like, as filtering, it's fine, but it costs you a mana every turn. And in the first couple of turns of the game, you're tight on mana anyway. But by the time it would flip that, you don't need that much extra mana. So I don't think I am actually on board with that plan. This hand is great. Like, it can get us a Batterskull. It has a removal spell for their first dude. It has a Wasteland. These are all things that we really like. Chalice on 1. Annoying. Alright, so I can let my opponent have 4 mana for 1 turn and essentially get rid of their city plus their next thing. But if I do that, I'll lose my Stoneforge if they have a Thought-Knot Seer. So I kind of like just snapping off the Wasteland and taking the 1-for-1 trade here. Like, the Flicker Wisp is eventually going to get rid of that city. Like, if my opponent didn't Chalice, then I would be absolutely fine with, like, letting them have 4 mana for 1 turn, I think, because I could path with it on the stack. But very, very little good for me happens if they, like, Thought-Knot this turn. Alright, drawing Magus is pretty good. Alright. Yeah, but if I take him off of, like, Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher, Magus is fine. Get the Batterskull. It's very possible that I'll shut off my ability to Violet in, but it's the equipment that I want. Like, if my opponent gets some amount of bulk in play, then I want to have the Batterskull, and I don't have anything first strike right now. Warping Whale it. Alright, that's fine. What do you got, opponent? Nothing that matters. Sure, you can get in there with those. I am slamming Magus even though I can't, like, cast the white cards in my hand. This is one of those cases where, like, yes, I chop off my leg, but I chopped off both of your legs. That's what's just happened. Like, I know that I made 2 of the cards in my hand dead, but unless my opponent has something like a Dismember, they are never casting their colorless cards again. Let me do some quick math. So P&K puts 4 power in board, so that gives me 6, 12, 18. It's a 3-turn clock. If I play P&K now, if I play a backup Magus, next turn I attack for 4, and then play P&K, so my opponent's at 14. And then the following attack is for 8, and the following attack is for 8 or more. So I can end up with the same clock if I play P&K or Magus. So we'll just play the backup Magus. Yeah, I don't know why my opponent is playing so many mountains in their Eldrazi deck. I chopped off my arm and disemboweled all of their limbs. Sorcerous Spyglass, okay. Look at that hand. You can shut off me P&K throwing some tokens at your face. That's fine. I guess I do need to consider that my opponent might always dust me naturally on 7 mana. Like they have 5 right now. No, that shouldn't matter. This game is the reason why I play MTG. So I guess if assuming my opponent has all his dust and that's their out, they go up to 6 lands this turn. I play P&K. I hit them for 8. That puts them to 6. I can keep 2 Thopters around afterwards. I could also play Stoneforge, get Sword of Fire and Ice, cast Sword of Fire and Ice. I'm just gonna play P and K. Like, if they always dust me, it leaves me with some power in board. Nothing is better than a good contamination, though. That is a lot of fun. For one side of the table. I don't know if it's actually all that grim if he always does, because, like, then we get to fetch, we get a plains, we flicker with Switchalis, we have Path for whatever's here, we have Batterskull as well, we have two Thopters in play still that can, like, clock him pretty quickly. Like, if he, like, Simian Spirit Guide all his dusts here, that's slightly more annoying. But again, then that's fetch, flicker, yeah. So why do we win? Game 2, Magus. Card is a good Magic card. Okay, so before I start my next one, I just want to address a question that someone in the chat gave me. I forget who it was, but someone asked me, what can you do about the Sneak and Show matchup? Because I feel like it's really bad. So I added this third Recruiter to my deck, and I feel like that made a big difference. Because in the post-board games, I have 3 Recruiters to get me some combination of Relic Warrior, Containment Priest, Palace Jailer, Revoker, Thalia, Wingmare to go and attack them from all sorts of different fronts. It's awkward because you have to play this weird guessing game of like, all right, is he going to put in Omniscience or an Emrakul or a Grizzlebrand or a Sneak Attack here? But if you kind of get a good read on what your opponent is doing, then like adding another Recruiter and the Leon Relic Warrior to your deck helps a lot. You know, it's no Oblivion Ring that when you put it in, no matter what, it gets what your opponent shows in or anything like that. But like that combination of tools has helped me a lot. One of the other things I realized is that boarding P and K in for the matchup is really, really good as well, because it's a card that produces 3 bodies when it hits play. So sometimes you show and tell that in, and if your opponent like Emrakuls, it might produce enough bodies where like you can survive a hit and crack them back for lethal. The alternative, yeah. So Moxall said the alternative is add a couple of extra prelates. So like in my mono white build, I address the matchup instead by adding a second prelate to the deck, so that I have 2 prelates total. Because Sanctum Prelate on 3 is really, really good because it stops both Kozilek's Return and whatchamacallit, Show and Tell. All right, so thank you all for watching me. We are currently 3-1 in this league with red-white taxes. And let's see if we can make this a 4-1 or whether we just more or less break even with a 3-2. I want an O-Ring Bear. I would be in for an O-Ring Bear. But can they print that after the Rest in Peace Bear? Alright, Pascal 3000. I played against this player a decent amount. Last seen on 4-color control. Probably keeping my hand. I'll look at it more closely in a second. Alright, I'm just going to do a quick search of my own document. So, a while back, I played against him when he was on Deathblade, and his last results were with 4-color control. So my opponent is likely on some sort of control deck of some nature, but I'm not going to know exactly what from the first couple of turns here. Or, excuse me, before the match starts. My opponent is tanking pretty hard on their hand. I will be keeping this 7. It has a lot of reasonable tools. even if my opponent is on a different deck, like in the dark, this is a solid hand. In before Storm. I love this hand against Storm. Like, our hand, like, it doesn't get much better for us than a hand like this against Storm. Noble Hierarch. Alright, resolves. If my opponent is Infect, I don't want to remove this Noble Hierarch. If my opponent is a Stoneblade deck, I do want to remove this Noble Hierarch right now before they get to slam a True Name Nemesis on like turn 2 or something like that. They say always bolt the bird. That's not always true in Legacy. I think sort of the play that a lot of players would take is Aether Vial pass, ride it out for a turn. And I might take that as well. Because we have this Magus, there's a lot of upside in getting the Vial in play as soon as possible. But since my opponent tanked so hard, so long on their hand, I think their mana's weak. So I'm going to remove the Hierarch. That is the call that I am making. Opponent was F6'd. Oh, that's a decision. Do I want to, like, Vial and Waste, or just, like, Thalia this turn, followed by Magus next turn? That's tough. I'm losing a lot of value off this Vial if I don't put it into play soon, but this might be one of those games where I just kind of ignore the fact that I have Vial and just play good cards. I probably end this game if I Magus next turn. It's awkward if my opponent goes like Stoneforge Mystic. But if my opponent just like has a handful of like cantrips and stuff of that nature, then like Thalia into Magus sounds amazing. If he just true names, will I die? Maybe. I think I want to Vial first. I don't have a Plains right now for the Magus. And like if this Vial sticks around for a little while. Ooh, so I was going to take him off the scrub to prevent Stoneforge. But taking him off of cantrips could be better. Yeah, if he has another land, like, he gets to cantrip anyway. Because it's probably blue. But if he doesn't, no cantrips. So I'll take the drop. It also prevents mana, like, Noble Hierarch specifically. Oh! I'm really glad I have this Revoker. I don't think my opponent has a force. Otherwise, they would have forced any they would have forced this Vial on the previous turn. So I'm just going to go ahead and cast the Revoker and save my Cavern for Human. So, like, I still might run into something like Swords to Plowshares, follow-up land, and equip. But if I don't, then, like, I will Cavern Magus, and, there's half of the equation. Oh, there's the other half. Uh-oh. Yep. Alright, so we're probably going 3-2 in this league, losing 2 matches to Deathblade. That's okay. Man. We're not dead, but we sure as heck aren't in good shape. We'll be porting my opponent off of blue because, like, I can beat this Baleful Strix and this Jit right now. Like, I have long-term plans that deal with those. But if my opponent drops a true name, I'll be stone cold dead to that. Flicker the Jit, make him use all the counters, then slam that fucking Moon Man. Yeah, I'd have to remove their creature too, but that is the general plan, yes. This might be one of those games where, like, I have to set multiple vials to 3 or something like that to, like, get through what's going on over there. Like, my opponent is land light, so that's good. So I could cast this Stoneforge now, but on my opponent's turn, I'm planning on just flickering. Or I guess on my end step, I'm planning on flickering out the Jitte. So I kind of just want to save the Stoneforge for another turn down the line. I can also just, like, wait and not even Flicker Wisp yet. Because it doesn't look like my opponent is planning on pumping. Yeah. So I'm going to wait a turn. I'm going to let this second vial get up to 2. I'll Flicker Wisp out my opponent's Jitte. I'll vial in a Stoneforge. I'll get a piece of equipment, throw a piece of equipment in play, and then, like, I'll at least have some board presence. And I have outs to the Strix that is there. My opponent hesitated a lot about casting this Ponder. I sort of wonder if it was their only blue card for a Force of Will or something like that. I mean, I guess in good news, this Jitte has 6 counters, but we just trade those 6 counters for a Flicker Wisp. That's okay. That's fine. So this one I'll say always no to for right now. This one I'll take up. Does Windswept Heath do anything? Not yet. But it's fine that we have the possibility to get a Plains for our land. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger on this now. Like, I don't have 100% a plan to beat what's there with my current resources, but I have a lot of draws ranging from just like a land to a Swords to Plowshares that like beats his current board. Opponent has given their Baleful Strix +2/+2. I don't know if they realize that we're at my end step. Yep. Alright, they've realized that. Alright, so we get a small relief window from Jitte counters. And this is going to let us put our Stoneforge in. Noble Hierarch. Sure. So my hope here is that I draw a land. So that with a land, and my opponent not having a removal spell, two big ifs. But if both those things happen, then I can take over this game. That did not happen. So this might be the point where I have to, like, accept the fact that I'm going to take some collateral damage and I might have to start playing into the Jitte, which doesn't feel good. So, like, I can play this Thalia. I can just put in the Jitte. I can Vial in Thalia and Vial in Magus. If I produce 3 different bodies, then my opponent can't use the Jitte counters out of fear of me getting my own Jitte counters. So this happens first because it cuts my opponent off of mana. Yes. Put in Thalia. Sort of the awkward thing is that if I put in the Magus, I can't bounce the Thalia anymore, so my opponent can just get rid of that with 1 Jitte counter. But again, I don't think they can use the Jitte counters. So I'd rather constrict their ability to do 2 things in 1 turn. Yep. Oh, yeah. Do you have another mana dork? Yeah. So I'm going to do this now. And just so I can F6. I used a little bit too much time talking, so I want to gain back a little bit of time. Alright. Recruiter is interesting. So I can Recruiter, get a Flicker Wisp, flicker out your Jitte, get in with my Jitte. Or I can just revoke the Jitte and try to beat you in a fair game. Nah. A Batterskull is not going to beat that Jitte long term. It's probably Revoker. My opponent has to use their Jitte counters here. So they'll probably eat Thalia and Recruiter. Although they might go after the Magus. Yeah, they're going after the Magus. That's actually great for me, because I have a second. If the board were slightly different, I could go after their Noble Hierarchs and, like, 100% lock them out of mana. That's not the world I'm living in. So if I bluff the Vial, I can take the Strix off the board and 1 Hierarch, but not the second Hierarch. Like, that's something that might work, or it's something that could, like, terribly backfire. Oh man, is my opponent just getting a true name through a Magus? That's devastating. I don't think I can beat that. Like, the true name has me dead in 2 turns, no matter what I do. It's super unfortunate after all of that. Yeah, my opponent is at 24 life. I think I am on literal 0 outs to beat that card. So I'll take 5 this turn. If I get a Batter Skull, that doesn't do it. Yep. Alright. That sucks. So we really lost that one to Jitte. A follow-up TNN through Magus is rough. That was unexpected. Alright. So my opponent is probably playing Bant Deathblade specifically. I have to decide whether or not I want to board out the Swords to Plowshares or not. I probably do. Like, fighting them on the mana front is tough because, like, if you waste your turn getting rid of a mana dork and then they just play like a Stoneforge that gets unchecked, that doesn't matter. But if you choose not to go and fight on the mana front, then like the true names and such can come down earlier. I don't like Palace Jailer against true name decks. PN Karen seems kind of slow here, even though my opponent is a controlling-ish deck. I can Cataclysm in this matchup and it's fine. But I kind of have to do it at the right time, and it's not great. Yeah, I do want to talk about that situation a little bit more. I think I'm going to leave in all of my Swords to Plowshares when I'm on the play. Yeah, I'm going to just do minimal sideboarding here and more or less run back the same thing. This hand's solid. Like, we have a Vial with a Vial Curve of Momthalia, Swords for a Mana Dork, Wasteland for a land. Like, there's a lot going right here. So this was kind of the ideal scenario, as I said when I was sideboarding. Like, we essentially took our opponent off of 2 mana sources here. We're gonna get to put a Mom in that they probably won't answer, followed by a Thalia that they probably won't answer. Alright, so my opponent chose to shuffle with their Ponder, which is great for me. Ooh, geez, it's a Magus, guys. That seems decent. I find it very likely that we will just steal this game off of that first play. Stoneforge Mystic, you bet. It's a Jitte, which is not actually all that scary right now. So, other than Jitte and Batterskill, my opponent shouldn't get to cast any more spells this game. So, like, Mom alone should hold back the Stoneforge. Yep, and the opponent just scoops to that. Alright, so game 2, we're on the play, and we win. Game 2. Mom, into Thalia, into Magus. That's great. And that was all uncounterable off Bile, too. The Wasteland and Swords on his first turn 2 plays really might have ended the game as well. Do I want to change anything on the draw? Like, the Swords to Plowshares might be a little slow on the draw, but, like, it's another turn 1 play against a Mana Dork, and their mana base is relatively greedy, so, like, it might just be fine to keep these. Like, I even think I like having them more since I have the Magus in the deck, in all honesty. Yeah, I'll run back the same thing. This one's a mulligan. I can't cast any of the cards in my hand with what I have. This one's a keep. It is a fine hand. I will put that on top. I will gladly take another land. Sure, so my opponent probably isn't playing any basics. Do you want to be wrong, though? I don't want to be wrong. So my opponent kept on 7 and didn't do anything on turn 1 or turn 2. That is worrisome. My opponent may have kept a hand that is, like, full of cards that are really hard for me to beat, whether that's, like, True Name Nemesis or Zealous Persecution or something like that. Containment Priest. Not great against my hand. Yeah, there's the true name Nemesis I was slightly worried about. So we'll get Sword of Fire and Ice. That will allow us to realistically race the true name. Sure, 4-color decks usually don't have room for basics, but did you account for your opponent being bad and making poor deck building decisions? Like, the more matches I play online, like, the more I see things where it's like, that shouldn't be in your deck, why are you doing that? I don't remember if we saw Wasteland. Oh, jeez. Second true name is scary. That should be death for us. Well, maybe not. That was a fine draw. So we're actually hoping our opponent attacks with both guys and we get to connect with Batterskull and gain some life. Yeah, they wasted my port. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was this Deathblade match or the other one. So I need my opponent to go and attack with both true names, which they will likely do since I have this sword. They attack with both true names, and I draw a land next turn. I'll get to Batterskull, equip Sword of Fire and Ice on Batterskull, swing in for 6, gain 6. And that would be a very good swing for me. If they just swing in with 1, then I 100% need to draw the land. If they swing in with both, then even if they don't, I can still gain 4 life off the Batterskull, which is relevant. Oh, great. So now they probably just attack with 1 true name, since they've double exalted and it doesn't change the clock. Yep. Alright, need to draw land. Land. Not land. Yeah, Fizzler, I've played against many of your sketchy decks. They're, ambitious. So my opponent should, take this opportunity to wasteland me. And now I have to fetch in order to equip this in all likelihood, and still just hope that my opponent doesn't have, like, a Swords to Plowshares or anything of that nature. Don't have it one time? Don't have it one time? Let Phil get back in this game? Huh? Huh? Oh, man. And we're up to 10 life. Oh, no. What are you doing? Oh, good line is good. I'm dead. So my opponent just gets to attack in, and unless they accidentally click through their combat, we're not getting there. That was really close. Our opponent played well to like not just Swords to Plowshares the Germ, which is sort of the obvious line. But we still 3-2'd this league, so that's fine overall. Alright, so game 3 was a loss. So game 3 lost to Double True Name. Alright, so let's adjust the other portion of this. And why doesn't it say I won against Eldrazi? I need to type win again. I didn't write how he won game 3 against Eldrazi. How did I win game 3 against Eldrazi? Did I just like Magus them again and not write it down? Yes, okay. So I did just Magus again. Alright. So again, here's the list. We went 3-2 with this. I've played 2 other leagues with this exact 75. I have a 5-0 with it and a 3-2 with it. So overall with the red D&T deck right now, I'm sitting at about a 63% win percentage after 145 matches. You know, again, I'm shooting for 66. 66 is where I want to be with the deck list when I'm like super happy with it. But you know, 63% over a game pool that big is pretty good. You know, because that includes all the random matches that you lose to things like Belcher and things of that nature. If you all have any questions for me, I'd be happy to take those real quick. Otherwise, I am going to be calling it an evening, and I'm just going to dump you into another stream that is currently doing Legacy. If you have enjoyed my my stream here, feel free to follow. I intend on doing another Legacy stream on Wednesday night. So again, I will give you all a second to ask me any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to dump you into Pascal's stream, one of my previous opponents, who just crushed me. Again, I am Phil Gallagher of ThrabenU University, and thank you all for joining me tonight. I will have some article content out probably within about the next 2 weeks with some tournament reports from some people other than me. And if you watch this video on YouTube later, or you catch the beginning of this video after I post it momentarily, I did do a very large breakdown of some of the D&T lists from the Open. So at this point, I'll say goodbye, everybody, and I'm going to dump you all into Pascal's stream.